right. Let me just... Yes, we are live, I think. Let me just check. All right. Yes, it's working. So today is the glorious appearance day of Srila Bhaktivinode Thakura, the spiritual master of Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, who is the spiritual master of His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is the spiritual master of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, in honor, actually, let's see which song. We'll chant one of Bhaktivinode Thakura's songs today. And I'm not going to use the guitar. There's a reason for that today. It has nothing to do with Bhaktivinode Thakura. It has to do with something else. Okay, so let's chant O Hey Vaishnava Thakura by Bhaktivinode Thakura. O Hey Vaishnava Thakura, Dayara Sagareda Se Karuna Kori. O Hey Vaishnava Thakur, Dayara Sagareda Se Karuna Kori. Diyapada Chaya Shoda He Amaya Tomara Charana Dori. Diyapada Chaya Shodo E Maya Tomara Charana Dori. Chaya Begadami Chaya Dosha Shodi Chaya Guna Deha Dashe. Chaya Begatami Chaya Dosha Shodi Chaya Guna Deho Dase. Chaya Satsanga Deo E Hamare Moshechi Sangera She. Chaya Satsanga Deo E Amare Moshechi Sangera Hashe. Ekaki Amara Loi Poi Bolo Urinam Sankir Tane. Ekaki Amara Loi Poi Bolo Urinam Sankir Tane. Tumi Kripakori Shraddha Bindu Diya Deho Krishna Namadane. Tumi Kripakori Shraddha Bindu Diya Deho Krishna Namadane. Krishna say Tomara Krishna Dite Paro Tomara Shakati Hache. Krishna say Tomara Krishna Dite Paro Tomara Shakati Hache. Amito Kangala Krishna Krishna Boli Daitaba Pache Pache. Amito Gangala Krishna Krishna Boli Daitave Pache Pache. O Hey Vaishnava Thakura Dayara Sagar Edase Karuna Kori. O Hey Vaishnava Thakura Dayara Sagar Edase Karuna Kori. Jaya Bhaktivinode Thakur, Jaya Bhaktivinode Thakur, Jaya Bhaktivinode Thakur, Jaya Bhaktivinode Thakur, Jaya Bhaktivinode Thakura, Jaya Bhaktivinode Thakura, Jaya Bhaktivinode Thakura, Jaya Bhaktivinode Thakura, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Haribo, 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 Nichai Gaur, Haribo, 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 Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Paramahansa, also Teros Tashi Shimad. His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivinode Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anandakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinode Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Maturanam Ki Jai, Jagadada Swami Ki Jai, Manamai Ki Jai, Shrimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, my own Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namani Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pachari, Nibashesha, Srinivadi, Astyata Dejatarni. So, anyway, so today's Bhaktivinode Thakura's appearance day. First I'm going to read his pranam mantra. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Sachidananda Namane Gora Shakti Sadupaya Rupanoga Vidayate. And the translation is, I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace Sachidananda Bhaktivinode Thakura. You are the embodiment of Lord Gauranga's energy and a revered follower of Srila Rupa Goswami. And let me read the translation of the song we just sang by Bhaktivinode Thakura. O venerable Vaishnava, ocean of mercy, be merciful unto your servant. Give me the shade of your lotus feet and purify me. I hold on to your lotus feet. Teach me to control my 6 passions, rectify my 6 faults, bestow upon me the 6 qualities, and offer unto me the 6 kinds of holy association. I do not find the strength to carry on alone the Sankirtan of the holy name of Hari. Please bless me by giving me just 1 drop of faith with which to obtain this great treasure of the holy name of Krishna. Krishna is yours. You have the power to give him to me. I am simply running behind you shouting, Krishna, Krishna. Okay. So now we're going to begin to speak about Bhaktivinode Thakura. So give me a second just to get this all set up, if that's all right. I have to keep the chat window open while we're speaking. Let me go to the chat window in case anybody has a complaint or something during the middle of class. Okay. So anyway, so Om Gana Timranda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinode Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So Srila Bhaktivinode Thakura Ki Jai. So let's begin to talk about Srila Bhaktivinode Thakura, if that's all right. So, As I mentioned before, he is the spiritual master, Srila Gauranga Babaji Maharaj, who is the spiritual master of Srila Bhaktivinode Saraswati Thakur, is the spiritual master of His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivinode Swami Srila Prabhupada, our divine spiritual master, founder, Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So, you may ask, this is a little side information, who is Bhaktivinode Thakur's spiritual master? Well, his initiating spiritual master was Vipini Vihari Goswami. But the more substantial link in the disciplic succession is not Vipini Vihari Goswami, because Bhaktivinode Thakur definitely had some philosophical disagreements with Vipini Vihari Goswami, and particularly Srila Bhaktivinode Saraswati Thakur had some philosophical disagreements with the guru of his father, the initiating guru. So the substantial connection to the disciplic succession is with Jagannath Das Babaji. And we find that when Bhaktivinode Thakura found the appearance place, which is called the Yoga Pith of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then Srila Bhaktivinode Thakura brought Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj there to confirm it. I mean, there's some indication that Vipini Vihari Goswami considered the appearance place of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be somewhere else. But actually, Bhaktivinode Thakura did an elaborate amount of research, consulting different maps, finding out old maps, finding out how and when the Ganges shifted its course, because for some time, what we know now as Antardvipa is the center of the 9 islands of Mayapur. In case you didn't know, Navadvip means 9 islands. So Antardvipa is the center, and that's where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. But we understand that for some time, Antardvip, or a great portion of Antardvip, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, had been covered by the Ganges. The Ganges always shifts course. Now you may say, well, what if the Ganges shifts course and the Yoga Pith and our temple is inundated? Well, I mean, you can't fight against the Ganges, but in any case, there's a lot of structures that have been put in place to sort of channel the Ganges. Of course, when the Ganges has her desires, who knows what will happen. Because in the early days of Prabhupada's establishing ISKCON Mayapur, and even later after Prabhupada left, there was extensive flooding in Mayapur, and sometimes the devotees had to take boats to go from wherever they were residing and into the temple room, and they would float in the temple room on a boat. Generally, they didn't want to swim in the water because the water was filled with snakes. Anyway, Bhaktivinode Thakura. Okay, so that's his spiritual lineage. And now I'd like to talk about what his day was like when he started preaching Krishna consciousness. Of course, we know he was working as a court justice under the British government, and he was a perfect householder, taking care of his children, taking care of his wife, and also at the same time maintaining or working the job and doing a first-class job as the justice, and also at the same time writing so many volumes of books, which I'm going to speak about towards the end if we have time. Books, essays, poems, songs about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and other spiritual topics. So anyway, and one book of Bhaktivinode Thakura's that I'm reading right now, I get a lot of inspiration from this book, is called the Jiva Dharma. Jiva Dharma means the Dharma of the Jiva. That's us. And this book contains many stories of devotees and even non-devotees non-devotees who are trying to stop devotees from progressing in spiritual life, and devotees who are trying to progress in spiritual life. And there are many different conversations between people who are coming to Krishna consciousness, people who are advancing in Krishna consciousness, and people who are on the highest level of devotional service. And this particular story, the Jaiva Dharma, basically takes place, it's a fictional story, of course, to bring out the essence of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, the three aspects of devotional service. So this story takes place shortly after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has left this world. Because you find that some of the devotees in this particular story are associating with some of the personalities that are mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, like Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, like Vrindavan Thakur, who's the author of the Chaitanya Bhagavat. So it takes place that I highly recommend this book. Of course, first, read Srila Prabhupada's books. Don't jump over the head of Srila Prabhupada. And you should understand the previous acharyas through the lens of Srila Prabhupada's presentation of Krishna consciousness. You know, oftentimes we find devotees who jump to a previous acharya and misquote, misunderstand, or misrepresent the philosophy because they don't really connect with Prabhupada. I mean, there's many instances of this, and one particular subject matter where this occurs is the position of the jiva. Another particular subject matter is whether bhakti is inherent or bhakti is inherited. So if you don't know what the difference is between those two words, inherent means that you have bhakti and it just is woken up by the mercy of the Guru, and inherited means you don't have it, you're given it from an external source, like the Guru. In many cases, the Babajis, not the bona fide Babajis, but in many cases the Babajis present that you have to be given it. In other words, they'll come to you, maybe not in a simple way, and they'll say to you, you know, I can see I'm giving you your Siddha Deha. And it's very attractive. You know, if we can be given something easily like that, and it's a lot, let's say, more attractive than having to work at it. But unfortunately, you're not given something so easily. Especially bhakti is not given easily. One has to really work at it, control the senses and everything like that. But we are very much prone to trying to take the easy path, the easy way out, you know, shortcut, like that. Like in the 1960s, people thought they could become spiritual by taking a pill, you know, LSD. And, you know, that's crazy. But Prabhupada actually said your spirituality is within, so you have to awaken it. And of course, you have to awaken it by mercy, by the association of pure devotees. So, you know, as far as inherited or inherent, you could just take the middle path. It's there, it's inherent, but it has to be given or awakened, as described Brahmanda Brahmate, Konda Bhagavan Jiva Krishna, Bhakti Lata Beach. Krishna. Anyway. So it has to be awakened by coming in contact with a pure devotee. So that's the point. So, anyway, so you find so many differences. Therefore, we approach Srila Bhaktivinode Thakura and we approach all the great acharyas through Prabhupada. So, let's talk about Bhaktivinode Thakura's day. I mean, how he was able to write so many books and do so much for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in a short period of time. I mean, that's amazing. And the answer is his regulation. He carried a pocket watch with him. Nowadays, of course, people, or many people, don't have watches. I have a watch, see. And the reason I have a watch is because I want to be regulated and be able to do more for Krishna. If I'm regulated, then I can actually do a lot more than if I'm unregulated, because when you're unregulated, you will tend to spaceout, which means what? Spacing out. Because you won't be aware of the time. I mean, all of a sudden you'll look at your phone and you'll say, hey, where'd the last hour and a half go? Huh, I have so much work, but now I have to stay up all night. You know, people do this in the university. You know, the phone doesn't actually do the same thing. Unless you're picking it up, looking at it all the time. But when you pick it up and look at it all the time, guess what you're doing? You're texting. You get caught up in illusion. I mean, if I look at my watch, of course, it does have messages. I don't usually get caught up in illusion. I just look at the time. Okay. Okay, so Bhaktivinode Thakura's strict schedule was as follows. And of course, obviously there was some variety if he was traveling or had some special preaching programs, but on a daily basis when he was working his job, supporting his family, taking care of everything, this is his schedule. So he would take rest every evening between 7:30 and 8, and that may appear to be really early. For many of you, you think that life begins late at night. I mean, I know I do a lot of preaching in Fiji, and the programs don't begin till 8 o'clock at night. And so many home programs, you know, people love to stay up late, but that is not our system. Our system is rise early. Jeev Jago, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says. Jeev Jago, Gota Chanda Bole, Gota Nidra, Yaomaya, Pisa Chira Kole. Wake up, wake up, wake up. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go to the villages, Runadaya, Kirtan, Udila Aruna Pura Babage, Dwi Jamani Gora Amani Jage. He would go and just cry out, wake up, you're wasting your human form of life. Okay, anyway, so he would take rest between 7:30 and 8, because that's how you're going to wake up early. But he woke up really early. He woke up at 10 p.m. at night. Wow. Like 2 hours, 2.5 hours of rest. And he would rise and light his oil lamp, because at that time they didn't have electricity. And he would write the whole night and until about 4 o'clock in the morning. At 4 o'clock in the morning, he would take what we call a power nap for half an hour. And then at 4:30, he would rise again, wash his hands and face, and chant japa until about 7 o'clock. And then at 7 o'clock, he would write letters, do correspondence, and everything like that. And at 7:30, he would read. So, you know, very, very strict. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, how many of us, even I'm not that strict, how many of us can be that strict in our daily lives? And so 7:30, 8:30, he would read for 1 hour, read Vaishnava literature. And his reading was like so many literatures he read, and so much he memorized. I mean, reading the Jaiva Dharma, you hear all these different quotes from the Upanishads and from the Puranas, and of course the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, and he has all that in his head. You know, nowadays, of course, what do we have when we want to write something? We have a computer. So we just type in some search term, and we get the verse, and we get the reference. And so, you know, it's really easy to do writing today. But in those days, everything was just manual, basically. Of course, they had the printed word. There was printing press. There was a printing press then. So at 8:30, he would receive guests, or continue to read if there were no guests. And then he would take a 15-minute power nap from 9:30 to 9:45. 9:45, he would take his morning bath. He would take his breakfast, which was a half quart of milk. That's 2 cups, in case you don't know. A couple of chapatis, fruit, and at 9:55, he would go to court in a carriage. Carriage means, of course, pulled by horses, not a horseless carriage. And he would wear, not a dhoti, he'd wear coats and pants, coat and pants to court. But he always kept his neck beads, which are described as double-sized neck beads, and tilak. It's described that in a half a day, he could make a decision that would take, or a group of decisions, that would take with the other justices 1 day or 2 days to do. So he was very strong, and he would make his decisions immediately. He didn't allow any nonsense in his court. And he would chastise sometimes the people who were testifying before him, whether it was a lawyer or a prominent person, if they started just to juggle words. And he also shaved his head at least once a month. He was very strict as far as instruments. Of course, that's not why I did not play the guitar. But he didn't allow the harmonium, and he never had any debts. So here's his day again. So at 10 o'clock, court began, and the court was finished at 1 o'clock. He'd come home, bathe, and refresh, and at 2 o'clock, he'd return to his office. And he'd work at his office until 5 p.m., at which time he would translate different works from Sanskrit to Bengali or write different literatures until he took rest, which I mentioned before was between 7:30 and 8 o'clock at night. So also in the evening, he would take an evening bath and take another meal, which was rice, chapatis, another 2 cups of milk. And as I described before, he would always consult his pocket watch. He was always charitable to brahmanas and charitable actually to everybody. He never wanted to accept any honors and titles, even though he was given honors and titles offered to him by the government and other people. And he was very strict in his moral principles, avoided all luxury. He did not chew betel. That may seem like a little thing, but in those days, and even today, that's very prominent in India. And he didn't go to theaters. Of course, at that time, it wasn't movie theaters. It was different plays, and there was a lot of illicit life going on around those different plays, with men and women mixing loosely. He spoke many different languages. Some of them he spoke was Bengali, Sanskrit, of course Bengali, that's his native language, Sanskrit, English, Latin, Urdu, Persian, and Orient. And as far as his prolific output of books, that started when he was 12 years old and continued until his departure from this material world. Okay, so here is a brief exposition of his life. He was born in 1838 on September 2nd, so we're celebrating according to the moon calendar. And he was born on, of course you say born, or we say appeared, sorry, on a Sunday in Nadia. And he was the 7th son of a great devotee named Raja Krishnananda Datta, who was a great devotee of Lord Nityananda. So, but the point is his father passed away when he was very, very young. So he was basically surrounded by either the Shaivites or people who did not like Krishna or respect Vaishnavism. So one name he had when in his early days, or later on, he was called the Daitya Kulera Prahlada. That means Prahlad, who was born in the family of demons. By his godfather, he was named Kedaranatha, and of course that's the name of Lord Shiva. So, in the beginning of his childhood, he had a very opulent environment. So he was at a mansion of his grandfather, and when he was 11 years old, his father passed away, which I mentioned previously, and after that time, the grant of land and the money and everything like that fell away from the family. The family fell into a condition of abject poverty. And so Kedarnath, Bhaktivinode Thakura, tolerated all these things with great endurance. So his marriage was arranged when he was very young. And I mentioned this before, sometimes the marriages were arranged when the boy and girl were very, very young, they did not live with each other, but at least when they grew up, they would understand, when they got older, of marriageable age, they would understand basically that they had a husband or had a wife, so they weren't just like looking all over, hunting. And you find this nowadays, of course, people are hunting, especially the men are hunting, and the women are looking, is that the man for me? But that really contaminates society when you have that going on. And then you have illicit life, and then so many things have to be done to counter that illicit life. And then you have so many diseases that occur. I'm not going to get into that. So, then, when he was about 12 or 13, there was a Muslim soothsayer, that means someone who could tell the future, who predicted that the village he was living in would soon become pestilence-ridden and deserted. And also predicted that Kedarnath, that's Bhaktivinode Thakura, would become recognized as a great devotee of Lord Krishna when he got older. So when he was 18, he went to Calcutta to go to college. And then he started writing extensively. Even before that, he was writing extensively in English as well as Bengali. And he was publishing and lectured in both languages. And he was so proficient in the English language that he actually taught speech making to a person who became a well-known orator in the English Parliament. So his first major book he composed between the years of 1857 and 1858, a two-part English epic entitled the Poriad, and that's available now, which he wanted to complete in 12 books. And these books describe the life of Porteous, who met Alexander the Great. So in the beginning, he was not really that much attracted to the Vaishnavas who he encountered. Now, the Vaishnavas who he encountered generally, let's say, at that particular point, with some exceptions, obviously, were Sahajas or didn't apply the Vaishnava philosophy properly. In fact, before Bhaktivinode Thakura, to a large extent, the Vaishnava practice and philosophy was seen as a justification for illicit life. And so Bhaktivinode Thakura was not interested in that. He was very ethical, very religious. So in the beginning, he was more attracted to Christian theology. And he found it more interesting than Hindu theology, because Hindu theology tended to be polytheistic or no-theistic or atheistic or personalistic or karma mimamsa, and he just couldn't digest it. So he would study Christian theology and philosophy. He studied Channing, Parker, Emerson, Newman, and he actually tried to combine certain aspects of the Indian philosophy or the Vedic philosophy at this particular point, because he gave a lecture at the British Indian Society about the evolution of the material mode of goodness. So he still hadn't come in contact with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's writings. So we'll figure that out a little later. So at one point he went to Orissa to visit his paternal grandfather, who was named Raja Vallabhadatta, who is now living as a renunciate in Orissa. And he was getting ready to leave the future. He asked to see Bhaktivinode Thakura before he left. And so he wanted Bhaktivinode Thakura to be with him when he left this world, which he did in 1859, when Bhaktivinode Thakura was about 21. So after receiving his grandfather's last instructions, which were that to preach Krishna consciousness and travel all the monasteries and temples in the state of Orissa, so he started doing that. So then, let's get these dates proper. Okay, 1861, he first accepted the post of deputy magistrate in Bengal, in the government under the government of Bengal, which was actually under the English people. So then he started to have some association and he started to want to obtain copies of the Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was actually hard for him to find copies of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srimad Bhagavatam was extant at that time. So eventually, when he went to Calcutta, he found copies of both of these books. And once he read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which he read repeatedly, his faith in Krishna consciousness became more and more developed, and he became absorbed in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings day and night, and even published a song about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu entitled Satchidananda Premalankara. And so then he started to preach about Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and so his devotional sentiments became completely known and obvious to everybody. So the interesting thing is, you may say, well, does that mean he became a devotee? No, he didn't become a devotee. He was always a devotee. And he's a Nityasiddha devotee. Nityasiddha means what? That eternally liberated. He's considered to be a Shakti Avesha avatar. It means an empowered incarnation of the Lord, the Jiva soul, who was empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who came down to fulfill a particular mission. So so in the beginning, his pastimes were such that he appeared not to be that interested in Krishna consciousness. And his pastime later on indicated that when he came in contact with the Chaitanya Charitamrita, his interest in Krishna consciousness blossomed. Of course, that's the what happens practically with all of us, but he was showing by example that when one comes in contact with transcendental sound, that sound awakens one to one's original nature. Although he was always awakened and he was always under Yogamaya. So under the influence of Krishna's internal potency, Yogamaya, sometimes pure devotees appear not to be pure devotees. That's interesting, isn't it? Just like Arjuna. Okay, let's talk about Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. He appeared to be bewildered, but that was Krishna's Yogamaya who put him into a state of bewilderment, because Arjuna is Krishna's constant companion. As Krishna states in the Gita, that when he spoke to the sun god Vivaswan millions of years before the Bhagavad Gita was spoken, or at least at the Battle of Kurukshetra, then Arjuna was present. And Arjuna is also present as Nara and the Nara-Narayan twins, the twin sons of Dharma. So anyway, therefore Arjuna was put into illusion so the Bhagavad Gita could be spoken. And also devotees are put into illusion, not so simply because a book can be spoken or some lecture can be given, so that a particular rasa can be tasted. Rasa means a taste, of course. A particular rasa is composed of different bhavas. And so there's a particular rasa of coming to Krishna consciousness. Of course, I'm not saying that I was Krishna conscious before. I certainly was not. But when I came to Krishna, when I first came in contact with Prabhupada, there's a specific rasa that basically is only tasted during that particular time. When I first heard Prabhupada on the radio, there's a particular rasa. When I first saw Prabhupada for the first time, there's a particular rasa. When I first chanted Hare Krishna, there's a particular rasa. Rasa means taste. So, anyway, some more stories about Bhaktivinode Thakura. At one particular point, he was transferred to this place of Champarana, and this Champarana was an interesting place. People used to worship a ghost in a banyan tree. And this ghost in the banyan tree had the power to influence the mind of the judges in court to decide in favor of the worshiper. Nice to have that particular tree. Anyway, and ghost. Bhaktivinode Thakura, wanting to have justice, in other words, he didn't want court justices to be influenced by ghosts. He said, I got to get rid of this ghost. And so he engaged the father of a particular girl scholar her name was Ramabai, to read Srimad Bhagavatam under the tree. So he read Srimad Bhagavatam under the tree for 1 month, and after that the tree crashed to the ground, and I guess the ghost went away. So, and therefore, when that happened, people's faith in the Srimad Bhagavatam, people's faith in Krishna increased exponentially. So then, after that, he was stationed, at a particular time he was stationed in Jagannath Puri, and also in other places in Orissa. So near the capital of Orissa, which is called, I don't know if it was at that time, now it's Bhubaneswar. But anyway, in the town of Kamanala, there was a yogi who would be cheating people. How he would cheat people? He had yogic powers, and he would tell people to send their daughters, their wives, their whatever, to meet with him, and he would have illicit life. His name was Abhishekishena, and he could lean into fire and rock back and forth across the flames, and he actually produced fire from his hair too. Yogic powers. And he had 2 companions who were named Brahma and Shiva, because if you have Vishnu, you have to have Brahma and Shiva. So even the kings there, the smaller kings in the state of Orissa, were providing funds for the construction of his temple to himself. And they sent him women. So this Vishikashena declared that he was going to drive away the British and declare himself to be king. And so that aroused the ire of the British. So there was a district commissioner named Mr. Ravenshaw, obviously, from England or from Scotland, who requested Bhaktivinode Thakura to bring Vishikashena to justice. So Bhaktivinode Thakura went there, and this Vishikashena said, "You better not mess with me. I'm the Lord." Phew. Bhaktivinode Thakura said, "You're a very accomplished yogi, and please come to Jagannath Puri, where you can have darshan of Jagannath." And this Vishikashena said, "Why should I go to see Jagannath? He's only a piece of wood." Oh. And Bhaktivinode also, he said, "I am the supreme in person." And when Bhaktivinode Thakura heard that, he had him arrested and brought to Jagannath Puri and threw him in jail. But because he was a yogi, he had to be guarded by a lot of Muslim constables and policemen from Cuttack day and night. Brahma and Shiva avoided arrest, saying that they were forced to do what Vishikashena had said. So anyway, there was a trial that lasted for 18 days. Thousands of people gathered outside protesting. "You are condemning God." Sounds like the politics in America, doesn't it? Whew. People, things repeat, history repeats. Even though it was so ridiculous. So on the 6th day of the trial, Bhaktivinode Thakura's daughter got sick. And Bhaktivinode Thakura said, when his wife said, "You better give this up," he said, "Let us all die, but this rascal has to be punished." He had such determination. So the day before he was going to pass judgment, he became seriously ill and died, but he dragged himself to court. He said, "Let us all die, but let this rascal be punished." On the last day of the trial, Bhaktivinode Thakura, being ill, dragged himself to court, pronounced the guy guilty, and while this guy, Vishikashena, was being ready for jail, Dr. Walter, who was the district medical officer, cut off all the yogi's hair, and this yogi drew power from his hair. So he hadn't eaten or drunk during the whole trial, so he fell to the floor like a dead man, had to be carried to the jail. So he was so disturbed that after 3 months, he took poison and died. So Bhaktivinode Thakura in Jagannath Puri also elaborately studied the commentary of Sridhar Swami and the Sat Sandarbhas of Srila Jiva Goswami, and intense study of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which we know is the nectar of devotion. So, between 1874 and 1893, besides his work, he composed many Sanskrit literatures and books in English, but Sanskrit primarily, Sri Krishna Samhita, Tattva Sutra, Tattva Viveka, and many books in Bengali, such as the Kalyana Kalpataru. And while he was in Jagannath Puri, he actually he established a Vaishnava society in the Jagannath Vallabha Gardens where Ramananda Roy did bhajan. And so there's so many things that happened there. First of all, he was giving instructions to Radhacharan Das Babaji. Yeah, he was Radhacharan. Charan, yeah, Charan Das Babaji. Charan Das Babaji, not Radhacharan Das Babaji. And so this particular individual, Charan Das Babaji, actually came up with a bogus mantra, which was, I'm not going to give you the bogus mantra, but once one of his followers, or several of his followers, established a temple right next to our Krishna Balaram Mandir, and they preach and chant this bogus mantra. Basically, the bogus mantra says you shouldn't chant Hare Krishna and Kirtan, you should only chant Hare Krishna and Japa, which is against Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message, example, etc., like that. So, eventually, Charan Das Babaji apologized to Bhaktivinode Thakura, and then, even though he apologized, 6 months later he went mad and died in great distress. Wow. So also, on the 5th day of the month of Magh in the year 1874, the fourth son of Bhaktivinode Thakura took birth, and his name was Bimal Prasad, and later on he was known as Srila Bhakti Saranta Saraswati Thakur. So, another thing interesting happened in Jagannath Puri. It's described that he really regulated the deity worship in Jagannath Puri. He discovered that the king of Jagannath Puri was taking all the money from the hundi and using it for a sense grad. And so obviously this money belonged to Lord Jagannath, so Bhaktivinode Thakur forced the king to spend even his money, what to speak of Lord Jagannath's money, to give Lord Jagannath Bhoga 52 times daily. So the money went really fast. And the king became so angry that he hired 50 pundits, obviously he had some money left, and to do a sacrifice for killing Bhaktivinode Thakura. And this sacrifice went on for 30 days. And on the 30th day, when the last oblations were poured, the king's son, and not Bhaktivinode Thakura, died. So, let's see, we don't have much time left in class. So he took initiation from Bipini Goswami, which I mentioned before, who was a descendant from the Janava family, Janava Mata. Janava Mata was Lord Nityananda's wife, who was a spiritual master. And one of his Bhaktivinode Thakura's sons was Lalit Prasad, who Prabhupada mentioned and who the devotees visited, and he was born approximately at that particular time. So let's go ahead, because actually we don't have much time left in class. There's so much to say about Bhaktivinode Thakura. So in 1887, he wanted to quit government service, and he wanted to go to Vrindavan, but he heard Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu give him a message. Lord Chaitanya appeared to him and said, first you have to go to Navadvip, and that was actually to establish the place of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. So Bhaktivinode Thakur applied for a transfer to Krishnanagar, which is very close to Navadvip. And he used to go to Navadvip and search for the birth site of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One night while he was sitting on the roof of the Rani Damshala, in Navadvip, which is actually across the river from Antardvip, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. He was chanting on his beads, and he spotted a very tall tree, a tall tree actually, that's a type of palm tree, and there was a glow coming from it, and there was a small building, and he went to the library there, and he studied old manuscripts of the Chaitanya Bhagavat and the Navadvip Dham Parikrama by Narahari Sarakat, and old maps. And finally he confirmed with Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj that this was the place of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. So he also acquired a plot of land near there at Godramadvip, which is across what we call the Jalangi River, and he established a Namahata there. And Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj would come there and do kirtan with him, and both of them would worship Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at the Yoga Pit, the place where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. There was a miracle, too, that occurred there. One time, Bhaktivinode Thakura's sons, one of them, contracted a skin disease, and Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj told the boy to lie down at the birth site and for the night, and he did so the next morning. He was completely cured. So in 1891, actually, he took leave from government service for 2 years, and he went to preach Harinam everywhere, and preached and traveled everywhere around Bengal and other places, preaching the glories of Navadvip Dham. So in 1894, he retired at the age of 56 completely, and this move was opposed by his family and other authorities, and he stayed at Surabhi Kunja, which is also in Godam Dweep, which is where he established his house. And sometimes he went to Calcutta and he begged door to door for building the Yoga Pit temple. So, I think it was, 1896, Bhaktivinode Thakur's small book, known as the Sri Gauranga Lila Smarna Mangala Stotram, which had an introduction in English entitled Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Life and Precepts, was sent to the Western world. And of course that 1896 is the same year that His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada appeared in this world. In 1908, whoops, let me just go fast. We have to end pretty soon, okay. So some words from professionals about him. There was a high court judge who said, I knew Bhaktivinode Thakura intimately as a friend and a relation, even under the pressure of official work. As a magistrate in charge of a heavy subdivision, he could always find time for devotional contemplation and work, and wherever I met him, our talks would turn in a few moments to the subject of bhakti and Dvaita Vada, and the saintly work that lay before him. Service of God was the only thing he longed for, and service under the government, however honorable, was to him a clog. And as I said before, Bhaktivinode Thakura composed, looks like at least 50 different literatures, probably more than that, different literatures and poems and essays during his life. And Bhaktivinode Thakura actually brought the message of Krishna consciousness back into repute in India. Before that, it had been fallen into disrepute. In other words, people disrespected Krishna consciousness because the so-called followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the so-called followers of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, were actually engaged in illicit activities. And Bhaktivinode Thakura actually straightened all that out and reestablished the authenticity of Krishna consciousness to a large extent. Of course, there were also authentic devotees, but Bhaktivinode Thakura actually established it in the public eye, the authenticity of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Okay, and just one other thing, I wanted to share with you the last picture that was taken of Bhaktivinode Thakura. Where is that picture? Uh-oh. I had it there. Oh my God. Anyway, I had it saved, but somehow or other it didn't save to the right place. Let me see what's... No. Anyway, so there was a picture of him because he actually took sannyas shortly, Babaji, like before he left this world, and he locked himself up, feigning illness, so that nobody would bother him, so he could be absorbed in Krishna's holy names. Okay, so we got 3 or 4 minutes left for class. So, does anybody have a question or comment? Let me just unmute everybody.
Please accept my humble obeisances.
Okay, what's your question?
Because you just said that bhakti is to be given. It is not. I thought bhakti is always
Inherent, but you need a devotee to awaken it within your heart. So it has to, it's sort of like a compromise between the two positions. Like some devotees say, devotional service is inherent, and it is. And some devotees say it's not inherent, but it is inherent. But they say it has to be given. So we're making sort of like a win-win solution, win-win compromise. Bhaktivinode Thakura, Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and all these devotees presented the point that bhakti is inherent. It's there in the heart. Has to be awakened, but it's awakened by the mercy of a devotee.
if we chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, can't we awaken it ourselves?
Not unless you're given it by a devotee.
It is given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for all
Yeah,
the
but you have to get it through a devotee. Just like I knew about Hare Krishna before I came to Krishna consciousness, but until I heard it from Prabhupada, it didn't awaken me.
What about doing service in the temple or anywhere? Because Semanamukha he
Well, you're serving Prabhupada. You're serving Prabhupada and serving the devotees, and certainly you've heard from Prabhupada. You're associating with, you're hearing it from devotees because you're associating with Prabhupada's followers.
I'm chanting 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, so it is not effective then because I have not been initiated yet.
I didn't say that. You're not listening to me. Because you're chanting 16 rounds because you got the 16 rounds through the mercy of Prabhupada. You understand? If you would just like picked it up from reading something that wasn't from Prabhupada or wasn't from a bona fide devotee, like there's so many bogus people who chant Hare Krishna, and I'm not going to really mention any names. Some of them even have the word Krishna in their name. And they chant Hare Krishna, and they're very good musical performers, musicians, and they have thousands of followers, if not hundreds of thousands of followers, but nobody's been awakened to Krishna consciousness by hearing them chant Hare Krishna. So you have gotten the Krishna conscious mantra, the Hare Krishna Maha mantra, by the mercy of Prabhupada, and by the mercy of the devotees who are followers of Prabhupada. You can't get away from that. It's not that you just discover the Hare Krishna mantra yourself, right?
Yes.
Okay. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. You have to listen carefully, then you'll understand what I'm saying. Krishna consciousness is awakened, it's there in the heart, but the way to awaken it is through the mercy of a pure devotee giving us the holy name, giving us Krishna Katha, or engaging us in some form of devotional service. Okay, who else has a question? All right, nobody else has a question.
Please accept my obeisance, Shri Gurudev.
Yes, my blessings. What's up?
So I was thinking about when you were saying that it's inherent, that bhakti is inherent, and that originally we came from the spiritual world and we're with Krishna and performing devotional service because that's all we do in the spiritual world, that there must have been some agency to put to sleep our original bhakti, just like a pure devotee awakens it. So there must have been a pure devotee to, must have been at least some great, powerful personality under the direction of Krishna to put us to sleep.
Yeah, we desired Krishna Bhakti. We turned our face away from Krishna, and then Maya said, okay, buddy.
So Maya Devi is the one who put us to sleep originally by our desire.
Yes.
And then a pure devotee wakes us up. So ultimately, because of our smallness as a jiva soul, we can't either fall asleep or wake up without the agency of.
That's right. You got it. Just like alarm clock. Yeah, that's actually, it's like an alarm clock. Some people, some people cannot wake up without an alarm clock. I do. But some people are bada jivas. They can't wake up without an alarm clock. That means conditioned souls. So they have. It's how the it's inherent that you can wake up. It's not that the alarm clock gave you wakefulness. That's actually simple. The alarm clock did not give you wakefulness. It actually reminded you of your real nature,
Thank you, Gurudev.
which you objected to when it rang in the morning.
How many times have I hit snooze in my sojourn of
Yeah. Yeah, so okay, see everybody later. And it's happy appearance day of Bhaktivinode Thakura. And tomorrow is another important day. It's the disappearance day of Haridas Thakur. It's called the Ananta Chaturdasi Vrata. Disappearance day of Haridas Thakur. So we'll talk about Haridas Thakur. Thank you very much. All glory is to His divine grace.